Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Funnel Trade. So I just got done watching a couple videos from some other magic creators on YouTube about this survey that Watsi sent out a day or so ago to some people, or maybe it was just available to everyone. And, it had to do with why Spider-Man has flopped. And there were some questions in the survey about, did online creators negatively influence you? And then it asked a follow-up, which was, um, tell us who those people were. And you can pretty reasonably say that, well, if they prime you with the question of who are these negative influencers, did that affect you? And then they say, who are the influencers you watch? That potentially they were hoping to get the hit list of bad influencers. And, I think that's a maximally pessimistic reading of things. I think that the people who wrote the survey were probably too incompetent to think that far ahead. And like I've said previously about surveys in the corporate world, the way they work is that people don't actually care what the results of the survey are. They are designing the survey in order to get the result they've already decided that they need in order to push what they want to do within the company. And so no one at WOTC is going out and commissioning this survey with the intent of actually collecting real data and then examining those data and then making new decisions based on the conclusions they draw. They already have decisions and things they want to do. And then they're just saying, hey, how can I write a survey? How can I work with the survey company to write a survey that gets the answers that support the case that I want to make? Okay. So I don't read as pessimistically into it as some people do. Okay. But here's the fundamental problem. If you want to take let's say we want to be a little more kind to Watsi about this, okay? Let's say Watsi realizes, hey, the Spider-Man thing has not gone over well. We kind of screwed stuff up, and maybe we can take the pulse of our community. Now, in order to do that, we would have to assume that they ignore scores of content creators, some of whom, unlike me, are actually good at providing constructive criticism. Okay. So there are voices out there in the let's call it the magic YouTube ecosystem that I think provide good constructive criticism. I mean, Professor is pretty good. Some of his stuff he's absolutely brain dead on, but most of the time, what he says is very reasonable. He has some blind spots, in my opinion. He has some blind spots where he's an utter idiot, but the vast majority of the time, you can tell that he's thought things through and his heart's in the right place. He loves magic and he wants the game to succeed. There's no shortage of those kind of people in the ecosystem that Watsi could go to. And so they instead they have this survey, and it's like, okay, so you want to do a survey and you only want to focus on the failure of Spider-Man or why people did not engage with Spider-Man correctly, which really means why they didn't buy enough of it. And Watsi's problem here is they think that the issues they have are separable. And what that means is they think that they can just put on their blinders and focus down a very narrow path and say, you know what? Spider-Man not selling so great. We had to go undercut the market, dump the collector boxes on Amazon. It's just not going well. Let's figure out what is wrong with Spider-Man collector boxes. And they get the tunnel vision right there. And the real problem is, like I said, their issues are not separable. Their issues are they had what, 5, 6 standard releases this year. The standard rotation is 3 years long. Standard's in absolute turmoil over VV Cauldron and the frequency of bans and the bans not being frequent enough and the entire ban stance just being a muddled mess. Uh, they're having problems with all of these sets being too expensive, not having sufficient reprints, the sets coming along more often. And so not only does the product cost more, but you're expected to buy more of it because there's more expansions now. And then Everything is just more expensive on its own. People have less disposable income for these hobbies. The quality of the product keeps going down because when you push out six, seven, eight major releases a year, well, you can't play test them sufficiently. And because of the necessity that the production cycle is a year and a half ahead of the release cycle, well, it means that the feedback loop takes a long time to get through the system. And so all of these problems are going to get worse before they get better. Not on top of that, Watsi has turned modern into a rotating format. They've turned Pioneer into a rotating format. They've turned, and yes, I know Pioneer kind of is a rotating format, but you get my point that when you ramp up the power level of the current cards so much that it drowns out the older cards, then Pioneer may as well be standard. It may as well be Vivi Cauldron or Corey Steelcutter before they ban that. You know, this is the problem: is that they've they want to capture sales from every format. And so they creep the power of the cards up and they end up ruining all of these formats that people loved. Pioneer and Modern, and to a very, very, very slight degree, even the older stuff that you thought was safer, like Legacy. You can power creep things on new cards so hard that it starts to affect even those ancient formats. And then you have this problem where they keep putting these new staple cards into Commander. And so then you go to make a Commander deck, and it's like, well, gee, I'm making a black deck for Commander. Well, there's 26 staple cards that belong in every black Commander deck now. So really, I only get to pick 74 other cards, and 73 in a Commander or whatever. And so that's the problem. They've mismanaged nearly every aspect of this game so thoroughly, from format management, product management, release schedule, standard. The way that this stuff used to work is as long as they manage standard reasonably competently, everything else just kind of stayed running as it should. You design for standard, you don't power creep it a bunch because it's a rotating format and you don't need to. You keep the limited environments all uniquely interesting. And then once in a while, some cards will creep out of standard and affect Pioneer and Modern and maybe even Vintage and Legacy on rare occasion. And then people would have the ability to add cards as they liked to their commander decks, and everything worked great. And instead, now it's no, let's design every standard set. We'll have 8, 10, 12 standard expansions a year, and every one of them's going to have powerhouse cards that rotate every format. People don't want that. Players don't want modern rotating. The point of modern was not to be a rotating format. And yet here we are, where Modern Horizons 2 nearly rotates it. Lord of the Rings pretty much rotates it, and Modern Horizons 3 does a good job of nearly doing it again. And so all these problems are what's creating negativity in the ecosystem among the buyers, among the players, among the collectors. You can't just release a survey and say, "Hey, what did you think was bad about what YouTube's saying about Spider-Man?" Because that's like the surface level problem. That's like somebody's got a leg cut off and they're bleeding to death, and you're saying, "Hey, let's check his fever. Let's see if he's got a fever." You're ignoring the bigger problems that are going on here. You're focusing on one tiny little thing that almost doesn't matter, and to a great degree is a symptom of all these other things. You know, I hate to jump on the Universes Beyond hatred bandwagon, even though I hate Universes Beyond, but some people like it, but people don't want this much of it. When it first came around and Watsi said, "Oh, don't worry, it's just Secret Layers." And then they started making releases of it, regular randomized releases. And then they said, "Don't worry, it's not coming to standard." And then it came to standard. And then they said, "Don't worry, it won't be too big of a part of standard." And now it's over half of standard. And, there's all of these problems, and they all combine together to push down the morale of the players and the buyers and the collectors. And so then you have everything culminate in a disaster set like Spider-Man, where you have what, like 28 different Spider-Man cards in there from all these variants of Spider-Man man who appeared in all the comic books for the last 60 years. It just doesn't make a fun set. You don't want a Polaroid camera in your Magic deck as an artifact that does whatever bullshit it does. You don't want New York as a location in your Magic deck. And then you look out there and you see, God help me, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Magic. And I saw the picture of the Play Booster box. And first thing I thought was, thank God they didn't use the original like late 1980s artwork style. That would have hurt me too much. But I took a screen grab of that and I sent it to my good friend and I just said, my soul hurts. And he just said, "Yep." And it's like we both love Magic. Me and that buddy of mine, both of us have been playing Magic since 1996. Both of us love Magic. Both of us love Ninja Turtles. But we don't want Ninja Turtles in our Magic games. And we don't want Magic tainting our Ninja Turtles. And so there's all of these problems. There's this whole constellation of problems. But in the typical kind of corporate idiocy fashion, Hasbro and Watsi just look at it as, well, let's see, Spider-Man didn't sell well enough. What was wrong with the things that didn't sell well enough? Not grasping that this is a constellation problem of all these issues, of the continuous price increases, of not reprinting enough, of wanting to have standard have such powerhouse cards that it rotates all these other formats, of mismanaging commander so that a quarter of every deck is staple cards. Just everything on top of everything else. And finally, it culminates amongst the buyers as a rejection of Spider Man, and Watsi can't figure it out. So I'm not so I don't feel like Watsi is out there to get content creators. I mean, Watsi's too incompetent to execute on that. I feel like it's just it would be nice if Watsi would say, we do have some content creators like Tolarian Community College that we could go to and we could talk to and we could engage with and have a dialogue about things we might do better. But the reality is that as long as it's owned by Hasbro, none of that can happen. And those things won't get fixed. And this mosquito's distracting the hell out of me. What a time. What a time, guys. Do you realize Magic's been around for 33 years and it has the most amazing rule set? Do you realize that Richard Garfield delivered the first draft of these rules from up on the mountain and he delivered them to Watsi? And over the last 33 years, under the tutelage of Mark Rosewater, they have honed and refined these rules to the masterpiece that they are now. And it creates a game that is so amazing and so much fun that even though Watsi has spent most of the last 5 years stomping on its dick as hard as it can, people still love this game. People still want to buy the product. People still engage with it. They still share it with their friends and they still want it to be a part of their hobby lives. It's amazing. And it's tragic at the same time because it makes you realize and it makes you imagine really what would it be like if the people running this had two brain cells to rub together? Let me know what you think, guys. Thanks to everyone who makes this content possible, especially my very generous supporters on Patreon. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade. I'm going to get that mosquito.